We're diving into the event loop is closed error you might encounter when writing Pytest tests for your FastAPI applications. This frustrating error typically pops up because your test is trying to use the FastAPI application's event loop after it's already been shut down. Think of the event loop as the heart of your FastAPI app. It handles requests and manages asynchronous operations. When your test finishes, the loop might be closed, preventing further actions. Let's break down the common causes and solutions. 1. Incorrect test structure. A major culprit is improper test setup and teardown. FastAPI's test client interacts with the event loop, and if you don't properly manage its lifecycle within your tests, the loop closes prematurely. Ensure that you create the test client instance within the scope of a test function, not outside. The test client should be created within the test function itself, not before the test functions or in a setup method that executes before all tests. This is because test client creates its own event loop, and this setup runs before your test has started. Thus, when you try to run an asynchronous function using the test client, the event loop might have already closed. 2. Asynchronous operations outside the event loop. Sometimes you might try to perform asynchronous operations after the test has finished, and the event loop has closed. Always ensure that any asynchronous actions, especially those using the test client, are contained within the async block of your test function, using async defi to define it. If you have asynchronous code that needs to run in the background, consider using Asyncio's create task or other similar mechanisms. But be mindful that all asynchronous operations must be completed before the end of the test function. 3. Multiple test clients or event loops. If your tests unintentionally create multiple instances of test client or attempt to use separate event loops, this can lead to conflicts and the premature closure of one or more loops. Stick to a single test client per test function. If you absolutely need to run different tests with independent event loops, consider using fixtures to set up each test. Unhandled exceptions. A less obvious problem is an unhandled exception within your test function. If an exception occurs and isn't caught, it might prematurely halt the event loop, leading to the error when subsequent code attempts to use it. Wrap your test code in try to except blocks to catch and handle potential exceptions gracefully. 5. Using unit test instead of Pytest Asyncio. If you are using unit test for your tests, make sure that you properly integrate it with Asyncio. Pytest Asyncio is highly recommended to avoid event loop related issues. Pytest Asyncio provides helpers for running your asynchronous test functions. Make sure it's installed, pip install Pytest Asyncio, and used properly with Pytest markers. For example, you'd use the #pytest mark.asyncio decorator for your test functions. To summarize, resolving event loop is closed usually involves carefully managing the lifecycle of your test client within the context of each test function, ensuring all asynchronous operations are within async blocks and properly handled by Asyncio, and implementing robust exception handling. By following these steps, you should be able to write reliable and error-free Pytest tests for your FastAPI applications.